My name is Echezonachukwu Nduka. I'm a Nigerian pianist, poet, and author. With sincere thanks to the African Concert Series London, I'm happy to share some of my works with you. Today I'll be reading from my book, Chrysanthemums for Wide-Eyed Ghosts, and also from my forthcoming collection of poems, Waterman. The first poem I'll read is titled On the Niger. On the Niger is from my forthcoming collection, Waterman. The poem On the Niger is a short dedication to Onitsha. Onitsha is one of the historical cities in the southeastern part of Nigeria. I was born there and I cherish the city's rich cultural heritage. Onitsha is well known as one of the most vibrant economic hubs on the African continent, but also as a seat of academic excellence. On the Niger. The bridge across the face of Niger is not as old as stories about a certain discovery. An explorer's fable, history, and the politics of dredging embrace the water with questions. Onitsha craves to flow with the currents of Niger, hears her silent pleas and thunderous fury, the deep secrets of her journey northwards, sounds of pearls cast from her depths to markets and stalls, and watches her graceful dance to the rhythm of drums. Opeweka sits on the surface of bustling harmonies. Traders compete with chorus of prophets. But homeward, students in multicolor uniforms sing that water, even the Niger, does not wash away the horrors of history. The next poem is titled Inside the Old Room, and it's taken from my book, Chrysanthemums for Wide-Eyed Ghosts. Inside the Old Room explores family histories and the engagement of absences. For instance, the death of a loved one. Now in the poem, there is a subtle reference to the Nigeria-Biafra Civil War, which lasted between 1967 to 1970. So when you hear Kwashiorkor, that refers to the disease that thousands of Biafra's children suffered at the time as a result of severe hunger and lack of basic nutrients. Inside the Old Room. Grandpa's chair bears forbidden histories from his weight, the rust on its metal arm, and one lost leg which now makes it a three-legged artifact. Before he joined the queue of ghosts, he would sit here humming, waiting for an old friend who never arrives. He would tell stories of a war that ate many souls, his lost gun, and the last cry of a child bloated from Kwashiorkor. I still remember his face, he would say. The only diary on this desk is filled with names of people I do not know. How does a name reconcile with its bearer who now breathes dust? There is dust on the desk, curtains, books, files, and an old radio left to mourn the sting of departures. I think of lighting oil lamps as playing the role of God. First, wools soak the oil and matchsticks bring forth flames. And here, this lamp, devoid of oil and wool, bereft of torch, is Death's signature, placed on a stool, plagued by moonless nights and spider webs. Photographs and monochrome are placed on a shelf, their images staring longingly like a lonely lover awaiting familiar laughter, or like a night of terror yearning for dawn. There is no one left to say the Angelus, none to measure the size of silences, of loss resonating in midnight moans, sighs and hisses. That tiny bell atop the fridge rang at the hours of prayer. When Grandpa prayed, it was family census, litanies, and amen too many to become a long song. Here, he would say, here is where life used to be. Bring it back, good Lord. But his was taken instead. Inside the old room, departures are doors opening to new dreams. The last poem on the program is titled Stitching. Stitching is taken from my forthcoming collection, Waterman. Stitching has been published in Kissing Dynamite Poetry, a journal in New Jersey, USA. While I was writing the poem, I was trying to explore the idea of family bonding, love within a family, genuine laughter, relationships that tilt towards the responsibility to, to be there. In every family, you probably have someone you discuss certain things with. or perhaps when you're out there and you run into trouble, you know exactly who to call or who to speak to, because you have some sort of assurance that the person will be there. And in a sense, while expecting such things, of course, we have to also try to be what we expect. In other words, love is a responsibility that what we expect, that which we expect, that we also, have to be ready to give. So yeah, the poem tries to look at the bonding, sharing genuine laughter, relationship, and being sure that you have a shoulder to lean on. Stitching is an idea around healing, trying to bring back that which is broken or that which is bad. And of course, the poem also looks at the idea of legacy, which I consider one of the hallmarks of humanity, in the sense that as humans, we tend to work, hard, and then when we leave, when we pass on, we are remembered for something. We are remembered by what we've done, and sometimes it may not necessarily be accomplishments such as maybe you own property and all of that, or money, but in basic things or little things like kindness, genuine love, laughter, and all of that. So yeah, the mother figure in the poem had this tendency, this propensity to heal, to stitch things together, to unite, which is the embodiment of family. So here is the poem, Stitching. The last time I fell while cycling, I rose to the torment of loud heartbeats and shortness of breath. I have updated my list of cravings to include standing outside to watch you interrogate my nightmares, passing each story like a thread through the eye of a needle. I watch you stitch our affections together with steady hands, then tug at the string to measure its firmness. I sit at the table you set as an invitation to choose life. Your hands are soft, and I wonder if stitching makes them so. Perhaps that was what Mother did, stitching lives and broken families back in shape with songs and steady hands.
First of all, I want to give thanks to Rebecca Omordia for inviting me to be part of the African Concert Series London. It's a great honor, and I was thrilled when she asked me to be present in one segment, but to give me another segment was more than I could have asked for or imagined. So for this segment, I could have waited, I guess, to try to find a perfectly quiet time. It's a little difficult because we're still experiencing lockdown, self-quarantine, or whatever over here in the United States. And my son, who's on the autism spectrum, is a little unpredictable in that regard, in that you may hear him singing or you may hear him doing a little something. He's upstairs right now. But it occurred to me that it was actually quite authentic for me to be here with him, and with him having the possibility of perhaps making this a little less pristine than it might be otherwise. My son, I hear him emerging, and he's a big part of my journey. He's brought so much joy to my life, challenges I didn't expect. I never envisioned raising a child who had special needs. He's part of the reason that I don't travel very much. He's part of the reason that I have deep wells of emotion to express. So, you know, that's an aspect of my musical journey. Before I get to him, I guess I should talk about my journey as a pianist. I wanted to be a pianist from the time I was very young. My mom tells me I was 2 and I asked for lessons. My late brother was 4 years older than I, and he'd already taken lessons from my mom, who was our first piano teacher. My grandmother was a graduate of the New England Conservatory. She was from Bermuda, and she gave lessons to everybody on the island, it seems, but her own kids. My mom did get lessons, and she was the only one who really had a sustained interest. And she, in fact, plays in church regularly and actually plays very well, very musically, especially for someone who has had relatively limited instruction. She ended up being a school teacher, and she taught music in the school. And so, as I was saying, she taught her kids, of which there are 4, or were 4 before my brother passed on. So anyway, I'm 2, I want lessons. My mom thinks I'm too young. When I'm 4, finally she starts giving me lessons. And she's moving pretty slowly because she figures I'm 4. And as she tells it, I was taking for, I think it was 6 months, and I slipped her a note saying I didn't need her help anymore, because the idea was I figured I could probably learn things myself faster. So humility was not one of my best attributes at that age, apparently. Anyway, she sent me to another teacher, and I took lessons with this lady, Thelma O'Neill, for I think it was 2 years, and then I went to study with this, someone at the University of Alberta, which is where I grew up in Western Canada, and she taught me until I came to Juilliard at the age of 20. So I did my undergraduate in Alberta, and then I did master's and graduate work at the Juilliard School. And along the way, when I was 17, I had a major car accident. Slipped off a road, hit a pole, and this is another part of my journey as an artist, was an unshakable faith in my ability to play from memory, which was shaken by a concussion. And I spent many years feeling terror about performing from memory, although I continued to do it for many years, and had some wonderful experiences along the way, you know, playing with orchestras, etc. So over time, I gradually found that solo was really, really too scary, and I started collaborating. I started collaborating actually when I was 16, because my teacher at the University of Alberta, who was the teacher who taught me prior to that from the age of about 8, and she was a student of Erwin Freundlich's at Juilliard, which is why I had to go to Juilliard. She had no other place for me to go, which is kind of crazy that I never auditioned anywhere other than Juilliard, but that's how it went. And it took me 2 tries to get in for the master's, actually. But the doctorate, I was the only pianist who got in for 2 years. So this is a bit of a tangent. But anyway, as I was learning to be a collaborative pianist, the first experience I had was when I started university at 16, and I was studying art song with this teacher, and I was playing with a young man who didn't have a big voice, and the piece was marked forte. And so I played forte, he couldn't sing forte, and my teacher said, "Congratulations, you won." So after that, I learned to listen to the singer. Over the years, I think I've collaborated with every orchestral instrument, marimba, piccolo. So collaboration has been one of my great joys, good source of income, and also something that I think really deepened me as a musician. Another aspect of my pianism is playing the organ. I played the organ in church from the age of 14, and there's a legato that you learn from playing the organ that you're forced to learn when you don't have a sustaining pedal to help you out. So that's another part of my journey. I started performing solo again after having given it up for a few years because of this fear. And I just missed it. I missed playing the solo repertoire. And so I did a concert just in this church where I'm a church musician. And after that, I've just continued to do it. And I don't fear my memory anymore. I think what I see now is that life is short and things happen to people. I've always felt that playing the piano was a gift, and I want to use it as much as possible. I want to embrace it as much as possible. I thank God for it. And so being fearful isn't part of the equation. I just want to make music as much as I can. The aspect of being a writer, I always liked to write. I was a very introverted kid, and I was always scribbling stuff down, and wrote poetry when I was a little kid, and I also wrote actually novels. My first novel I think I wrote when I was 12, which will never see the light of day. But I always liked inhabiting people's brains, people who weren't me or had aspects of me maybe, but I just liked making up stories, and you could make the story turn out any way you liked. So that was a hobby, something I didn't really do when I was in college until, I'm not sure why I got this notion, but when I was in New York, I was reading, I'd read books sometimes, and I thought, I bet I could write something that's as good as some of these books, which again, it's not that I had no humility, but confidence, we'll call it confidence. So I wrote a story, it was called Choices, eventually. I didn't have a title at that point. I sent it to some agents, and one of them said her list was full. I didn't even know what that meant, and suggested I send it to a lady at Essence magazine, because they were starting a series of books with African American women as authors. And so my book was picked up. It was one of the first ones. I was told I had to spice it up a bit because it was being sold as a romance novel. And that was that. Choices was published in 1996. The next book that I was going to write, I was told I couldn't include it in their genre because it has to be a lot narrower focused. And more than that, there was a major character who was homosexual, and he had a relationship, and I was told I had to cut him out or make him, change the way that he interacted, and I didn't want to do that. And so a few years ago, I would say it was, I lose track of time all the time, about 2016, one of my former students at Florida A&M University, which is where my children were born in Tallahassee, both of them, invited me to a writing group online, and it was for Black writers, and everybody was writing poetry, and so I never thought of myself as very poetic since my extreme youth. But I took the chance, and I decided I would write a haiku. And then after that, I wrote a poem about my son, Malcolm, which was presented at the National Autism Conference. And so here's some footage of that. The song that he just sang is An die Musik. It's a very famous song by Franz Schubert. And the words of the song are translated from the German, "You, noble art, in how many gray hours, when life's mad tumult wraps around me, Have you kindled my heart to warm love? Have you transported me into a better world? Often has a sigh flowing from your heart, a sweet, divine melody from you, unlocked to me the heaven of better times. You, noble art, I thank you for it. Malcolm and I make music together on a regular basis. It's something that we really love to do, and I'm so grateful that my family is able to share music. It was something, he started taking voice lessons because he sang all the time, and his sister took training and the teacher was willing to work with Malcolm, and it's something that just brings joy to his life along with drumming. And so since we are so in tune with music, and music has meant so much, whether it was music therapy or just making music, I wanted to share that with you. I also wrote a little poem, as he mentioned, about Malcolm. Okay. Malcolm is mysterious. Autism does that when the cures don't work. He talks to himself a lot. To me, only occasionally. He answers what, where, when, not why or how. His smile, luminous. His laugh, irresistible. Reasons for his hilarity in bed each night, or randomly, obscure. What's so funny, Malcolm? He won't say, or can't. I pray. Malcolm is bound by misunderstanding. Autism does that when the cures don't work. How to explain not waving at men when he's been taught to greet everyone? It doesn't make sense, but so he doesn't listen. Will he get a job? Will he fall in love? I pray he has a chance for willing surrender to a woman. I pray the police never ask for his unwilling surrender or mistake his autistic behavior for non-compliance. I pray. Malcolm is free. Autism does that too. Free to immerse in his favorite virtual reality. No glasses needed. Free to like any music at all, without worrying if it's cool enough or black enough. Free to do Zumba and tap, no matter who sees. Free to be gentle. Free to be sweet. Free from having to impress with a stone-cold, rigid mask of masculinity. Free to be Malcolm. And because Malcolm is free, I pray. So after I wrote that poem, I started writing more poems, some to process just my life, my losses, different things like that. And I think it was 2018, I wrote, it was an email actually to a friend where I was venting about something, about a man. And so she said, oh, you should set this to music. And I don't know if she was kidding or not, but I took the challenge. I had been doing arrangements since I was quite young. I think my first compositions, improvisations and such were for my brother, who was a filmmaker, and he was a very talented actor who in fact did some professional acting. And so he asked me to write film scores for his Super 8 movies, so I recall that was my first compositions. But mainly I was an arranger, and a friend of mine, Daryl Taylor, who is the head and founder of the African American Art Song Alliance and just a champion of all things African American in song, had heard one of my arrangements and he recorded Steal Away. And so he asked me if I would write a song, because he was doing songs with text by Conti Cullen as a project. And so I wasn't sure I could write an art song, but I did. I wrote 3. I think Well, actually 2 of them have been performed, but the one in particular that I felt happy with gave me encouragement to think, oh, maybe I can write art songs. So anyway, that was in 2013. And so in 2018, when my friend asked me to set this rant to music, I wasn't sure if she was serious or not, but I ended up doing so, and I called it 3 Heart Riddles. And they've been performed internationally now, which is kind of funny to me since it was just a rant. And then they also are hopefully going to be published by a major publisher. We'll see what happens with that. So my poetry and my music intertwined because frankly you can use your own poems and not pay anybody rights, and that's handy. So in the course of writing those heart riddles, somebody said, hey, you should enter the Nats competition. And so I saw that I needed more songs because, you know, it needs to be a certain length. So I ended up writing a total of 10 songs, and this friend who was an angel learned them in time for the Nats competition. Now I didn't place, but anyway, I had these songs and people are interested in them, and they're still singing them, especially right now since everybody's interested in African American musicians. Here, My Heart is Awake is one of those poems, and also, yeah, you heard a little bit of the heart riddles behind this, and so, yeah, enjoy a couple of my songs.
In its quest for sleep, sweet stasis, my heart's sparks are frequently foolish and futile. My brain, cold water in hand, baths a moment in the warm ember's glow, and smiles.
So I'm just going to very quickly set up this other art song, Big Yellow Taxi. I wrote the poetry around the time that Notre Dame burned, and then about 2 months ago, a friend let me know about a contest that had to do with writing music to do with democracy. And I didn't read everything closely because I'm always rushing. And so I thought I was just supposed to write a song, and I had this text that referenced democracy, and so I wrote a song that when I read, it was not eligible because of my not reading the rules. So I sent it to Louise Toppin, who is an amazing, amazing woman and a dear, helpful friend to me. And as a result of that, I was on a panel with Thomas Hampson and Bill Banfield and Mark Clegg. He's a musicologist. And they were talking about African American responses in classical music, in art song, to the history of America, and specifically democracy. And so the song hadn't been recorded at that point, it was just in digital form. And but because of a 4th of July project that they were doing, we were told to submit music, and so I said, well, I better, if I can learn it, maybe they can include it. And it was kind of hard, but I learned it in about 3 or 4 days, and Louise, who has perfect pitch, sang the song overnight, like she learned it one night and then recorded it. And so the video that you see with captions is what resulted. The poem itself is a little longer. I have the whole text published on Medium if you're curious. So I'll talk a little bit more about myself as a writer in the context of my last novel completed, published, self-published this time, which is called Letting Go. Letting Go is loosely autobiographical, and it's funny to me because the other book that I wrote that was published, people assumed it was about me, even though I put a lot of things in it that made it not about me. Like the character had many situations that I couldn't relate to. For example, she had 2 kids. At that point, I didn't have any children. She had no particular goals in life, and I've always known that I wanted to be a performer, etc., etc. So I'm playing with that, and with my mom's suggestion that I write something that was about me in some way, I did this loosely autobiographical story, and well, I think I'll just read a little bit from it. I'll read a little bit about the blurb. Even though she lives hundreds of miles away, when Langston, who dreams of being a chef, meets Cecile, a Juilliard-trained pianist, he is sure that his history of being a sidekick, instead of a love interest, is finally over. Their connection is real and full of potential for a deeper bond, but the obstacles between them turn out to be greater than distance. Can these busy, complicated people be ready for each other at the same time? Does it even matter? Before they can answer these questions, each must do battle with the ultimate demon, fear. Told in a witty combination of standard prose, letters, emails, and diary entries, Letting Go, in the tradition of Chimamanda Ngozi Adichie's Americana, is a long-distance love story that also examines race, religion, and the difficult choices we make following our passions. From the great white north to the streets of New York City to the beaches of Bermuda, Letting Go is a journey of longing, betrayal, self-discovery, and hope you will never forget. It is a good juxtaposition to my journey. I recorded music by African-American composers. However, when I was growing up, that wasn't a priority at all. I grew up in Western Canada, and it was a very, very small minority in the town where I grew up. And honestly, I only started learning about music by Black composers when I moved to the States. And that wasn't at Juilliard. That was not a priority there either, although I did meet a number of Black performers and I did start to get an idea of some of this music. When I was a professor at Florida A&M University, which was my university job before I had my kids, that was where I started to become more exposed. Then my recording of the Leslie Adams Etudes was a result of meeting Daryl Taylor while I was at Florida A&M, and he was coming to give a lecture on African American music at Florida State, and they thought it would be a great idea for me to play with him since I was the only Black pianist handy. And so in doing that, I was exposed to a number of other composers. So that aspect of things I see changing rapidly, like as we speak, as I'm speaking, you know, there's a renewed interest, and I hope that it is maintained. But people like Rebecca, doing what she did before this became the moment to do it, are carrying the vanguard of this idea that it's not one population that can create great music, or rather that only one population can create great classical music. I think that all kinds of music are open to all people, and I'm a great fan of popular music, of all kinds of different expressions. And that's what I think it is. It's just an expression of our humanity. So thank you once again for allowing me to not only talk about being a pianist, but to talk about being a writer and also read some excerpts from my book.